Welcome to the Sleeping Man podcast with Greg Kerber and Jude Goldman. The podcast today is part of a larger podcast that we thought was so compelling, we decided to take this part of it and make it a Sleeping Man interview. The interview is with Tara Rule, and it's about her journey through Europe with encephalitis. She did not know she had that at the time. And as she starts in Bulgaria, she has no recollection of having traveled through most of Europe, except when she goes back and is looking at her social media posts. At times, she still thought she was in Scotia where she lived. It's so interesting and so incredible that we decided to take it out of the larger interview at True Stories and Tall Tales at Yogi Box Podcasts. Now, I give you Tara Rule.
Prior to that, I had started doing some digging because I didn't know what was making me sick. So I started to look into where there's a high prevalence of strange autoimmune conditions, benign brain tumors, things of that nature. And I found kind of the same thing my doctor did. And then I was like, okay, well, I live this many miles from GE. So I just kind of typed in like General Electric and my address. And it said the Sacandaga site. I'm like, what is that? A couple properties up from me was this and is this site where they were doing things with, and I mean, you can look it up. There's a PDF available online. A lot of it is blacked out. A lot of it is not available, but it talks about testing things with like electromagnetic radiation, uranium, barium, all this stuff.
Oh my God.
This isn't
Radio,
This is a whole other...
radio something or other.
Yeah.
It seems like some like kind of like remote viewing sort of weird stuff like that. But it's very, very, very radioactive. So they have to go in there like every 7 years to remediate it. And by that, I mean, they like burn the grass and stuff.
This is Scotia we're talking about?
It's in Glenville. Yeah. It's right before Charlton.
When you say remote, what was...
Remote viewing?
They were doing that with people?
It seems like it.
Really? That's the Russian thing, you know.
So I
remote
started
viewing.
looking into this stuff, and I have a family member that works for General Electric, and in their family, my other family member works for somebody, I don't know what they do exactly in the government. They do something. I don't know what it is. They do something.
Well, GE had been pretty involved in the government.
Yeah.
At all levels. I had an uncle who worked in the NASA program. He's probably part of Paperclip with the German scientists. So GE's been involved in a lot of things related to the government, everything from space to nuclear experiments, and who the hell knows what else is going on with GE. But but when you said remote viewing, are you talking about the remote viewing where I'm sitting here and I can tell you what's going on? No kidding.
It seemed like there was some of that. It didn't explicitly say it. There's a lot of stuff that's blacked out. I hadn't said much of anything to anyone, but my family member who, like I said, does something for the government. He's like, whatever you're doing, you need to stop. I'm like, what? And he's like,
really?
Get rid of your computer. Stop what you're doing. Stop looking into what you're looking into. I'm like,
oh,
what am I looking into? And he told me.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I was like, okay, fine, I will, I promise. And I didn't. And I kept digging and digging and digging and digging. And then I started to get visited by people from the government very regularly. And this is where the whole thing where I start to lose credibility with people. So I don't know if I should go any further.
No, go further. I'm all ears. I believe me. The government doesn't want any of us looking into anything, but go ahead. And
I think it's more benign than it sounds. So,
how did they know you were looking?
I don't, and that's the thing. I don't necessarily know if this is related. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like there's a correlation, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I started to get visited by, they said they were, quote, the Census Bureau.
This is a Census
I got a letter in the mail for something called the American Community Survey, which you can look up.
I know about it.
Oh, you know about it? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like 40 pages of very invasive questions, like how many electronic devices do you have in your house? How many hours a day are you away from your house and it's vacant? What roads do you take to get to work?
Oh my
do you have any petty cash laying around the house? Do you have any firearms? I'm like, this is a scam. Somebody's trying to like
Weird.
rob me.
Yeah, exactly.
I kept ignoring it. They kept showing up. And it wasn't like a nice guy and like a nice little button up coming with like a knock, 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 and they have their little badge. I got like a boom, 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 boom on my door.
Holy
I had
shit.
friends over.
Yeah.
We look outside and there's a blacked out SUV
Of
and
course.
2 guys standing at my door. And the only way I can describe them is they literally look like the Men in Black. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm not answering the door. Like, this is terrifying.
Yeah, right.
They kept coming back and coming back. And eventually one of them came into my house and they kept saying, you need to answer our questions. You need to answer our questions.
Holy crap.
And I kept kind of just ignoring. Before they came
and
into my house.
Their claim was they're from the Census Bureau.
Correct. So
Okay.
I didn't believe them because I was like, I filled out the 2010 census, guys. Go away. You're obviously scammers. I don't know what you want. I want
Right.
nothing to do with this.
Sure.
So prior to the guy breaking into my house, right before I left for Bulgaria, I got a call like 1 a.m. And it was somebody again, hi, this is so-and-so from the American Community Survey. I'm, how are you doing tonight, Miss Rule? I'm like, it is 1 a.m. And he's like, yeah, you're awake. And I'm like, what? And he's like, are you going to answer our questions? And I'm like, okay, look, you have threatened me with federal prison time, $50,000 worth of fines. I have literally told you guys to just arrest me. I'm not answering your questions.
Right.
And he's like, that's fine. I really hope you have a nice time in Bulgaria, Miss Rule. And I'm like, what? He's like, you're leaving in the morning, aren't you? I'm like, so you know the answers to all
Holy
the
shit.
questions. If you know I'm leaving for Bulgaria,
Right.
you must know everything. And he's like, oh yeah, I know. And he started listing off every like boyfriend I've ever had. I'm not joking about this.
Holy crap.
I have it recorded somewhere.
That is
So
so
this
crazy.
was so weird. And I'm like, if you know the answers, why are you asking? I'm like, is this like a compliance test or something? And he was like, enjoy your time in Europe.
So you're going to Bulgaria. So they were actually all of this involvement happened before all the other shit happened.
Right. So
So it's been ongoing
and that's why I thought maybe it was something where I was crazy because
it happened at that period of time.
exactly. So
I understood that. So that's what I was thinking in my head.
Right.
But what ends up happening is they show up after.
it gets further and further. So I went to Bulgaria.
Yep.
I had a roommate.
Mhm.
They were showing up. I'm not even kidding. Every other day.
In Bulgaria.
No. At this house I was living in.
Oh.
They did not show up at all when I left. The second I came home, there they were. And I got sick of it because they had blocked me and a few of my friends' cars in the driveway. And they sat and they're like, you need to answer the questions. I called the police because I don't like to mess with police, but I called them
Right.
because I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, these people are obviously scammers. I think they're harassing me. I don't know what they want. They seem to know an awful lot about me.
Right.
Here's the survey they keep giving me. Here's the paperwork threatening to arrest me.
Are you with the cops right now and you're going through? So they make a visit to your place.
Oh, yeah.
These guys are not there at this
No,
point.
they are.
Oh, they stayed?
Oh, they
Really?
stayed. They were in the driveway. And the
No
cop
way.
was like, yeah, I'm going to help you out here. He's like, hang tight. I'm going to like,
This is
talk
Round
to them.
Lake now, or is this
this
Scotia?
is in Scotia. This is in
Okay.
Glenville.
Yeah.
They're like, hang tight. I'm going to go talk to them. I'll be right back. So he's talking to them. And then he goes to his car and he picks up his phone. And he goes back and talks to them. Back to the car, back. And then like 45 minutes later, he comes up to me and he's like, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm like, what? He's like, this is a legitimate thing. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, this is a real thing. I'm like, what is? And he's like, you have to answer the questions. And I'm like,
That is-
why? And he's
Weird.
like,
Wow.
because I'm like, can I like hit them with like harassment and trespassing? No, because they're part of a bureaucracy. And I'm like,
that is.
so my hands are
So
tied.
did they ever show you ID? Were they federal?
They didn't show
agents?
me, but they
Or-
showed them.
Oh.
Wow.
So then I told the cop, I'm like, arrest me. Go tell them to arrest me. I'm not doing this with these people anymore. And they were like, we'll be back. We're not going to arrest you now. A few weeks later, one of them broke into my house while I was having people over. Somebody came in. They're like, hey, there's like somebody in your house.
You gotta be kidding
And this
me.
guy's standing there and he's like, I just need to know how many rooms are in your house. I'm like, what is going on here?
Holy shit.
So eventually I called them back and I'm like,
Is that not trespassing? Like, can't you have them arrested
the
for
cop
that?
said there was some kind of weird thing because
Because
he
they're
was like,
census people, or
yeah, he's like, well, it's kind of like
but they
the
can't come in
post
your home,
office,
yeah.
so you can't like really do too much like legally, and
oh my
technically they work for
God.
like the federal government.
The whole thing is, I don't even
Yeah,
know.
it's crazy.
So I
Yeah.
told them, I'm not answering the questions.
Yeah.
The first round of paperwork, you said it was voluntary. It is voluntary.
Yeah.
Okay, so pick another house. I'm a non-compliant person.
Right.
Well, we can't. I'm like, why not? How many houses do you pick? Like 100,000 every year. I'm like, in the state or no, in the country? Pick somewhere else.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's just a coincidence and you have to fill it out. I move, get a letter in the mail, knock on the door. They're back.
Oh, no.
And once again, it's coincidental. I move again, knock, 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 into a different state. Same thing.
In a different state.
In a different state. I moved to Round Lake and I was there for about a year. And I'm like, nice, nice. I lost them. I get a letter in the mail and a knock on the door. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a documentary about this. And I bought a whole bunch of cameras, security systems, everything. And I told my friend, I'm going to know if they're actually kind of like keeping tabs on me if
Right.
they never bother me again. They never bothered me again.
Wow.
And I called and I was like, I'm ready to answer your questions. And they're like, we have no record of you.
Oh,
You're good.
what?
That is so.
How coincidental is it? Like, I don't know the actual statistical numbers on that, but 100,000 houses.
In the United States.
And I was picked every year for like, what, since like 2012?
Wow. So, just to kind of go back, that's some sketchy shit.
It's sketchy.
Yeah.
And when I started to look into what relevance does this have, right? Like, could this be tied to anything?
Why you? Did you ever think that?
That was why I wanted to make the documentary, because I looked it up online, and you know about the American Community Survey.
Yeah.
They seem to target specific people, and they will follow them. And I'm like, there must be something that ties us all together. I don't know what it is. So
Interesting, yeah.
I did some digging online. I found one of the original like PDFs, like one of the plans, quote unquote, for the survey.
Yep.
And I couldn't really figure out what they were trying to do, but what I found was that it is actually started by Lockheed Martin, Department of Defense, and what was the other one? Homeland Security.
Oh,
So it said something in there about like they do choose certain people, and it's quote the 3Ds, which is delinquent, which is you're a criminal, dependent, which means you are relying on the government for assistance, whether that be food stamps or
right.
Medicare, Medicaid, and the other is defective, which in that time in the 80s meant you have some kind of medical condition that makes you, quote, not cognitively on the same level as other people.
Neurotypical?
Right. But at the time, I didn't fit into any of those categories.
Okay.
So I don't know if there is any sort of connection here,
That is too weird.
because that Sacandaga site was also run by Lockheed Martin
No way.
and Department of Defense
Oh, interesting.
and Homeland Security and
shit.
the U.S. Navy, and it was kind of like
Oh
bounced
my
back and
God,
forth between
that's
GE.
We
That's
gotta
a
look
whole
into that.
conspiracy
Yeah,
thing
we
right
gotta
there.
look into that.
Yeah, I want to definitely follow up on that whole thing, because I'm just sitting here going, did they know that you were going to be getting
I don't
sick?
know.
Would you be getting sick?
I don't know, and that's what, none of it makes sense to me, and I know it sounds absolutely insane and paranoid,
But it was happening.
but it was happening, and there may be no connection. It may be a coincidence.
It just may be I don't know. I don't
But it
believe.
seems weird.
I don't believe
it seems a little weird to me.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't believe in coincidences.
I don't
so-
really either.
Yeah, I
so-
don't. I always think things happen for reasons, especially when they're that persistently involved in the process. A wild story, no doubt, and the bigger story is even more compelling. So please join us back at True Stories and Tall Tales, and we will continue to give you these most unusual stories about true things in people's lives. With that said, thanks for listening. This is Sleeping Man Podcast signing you off. Greg Kerber. Until then, see you on the other side.
The LuckyBox.com.